Have you ever felt like, as you grow older, you're starting to lose that sense of independence you once held so dearly? Maybe you're living with your children or extended family, trying to stay close to them, but something just doesn't feel right. You're giving so much of yourself that you find there's nothing left for you. It's as if your needs and desires have been pushed aside, and you're constantly focusing on everyone else. If any of this resonates with you, know that you are certainly not alone. Many people experience this feeling as they age, and it's a topic worth diving into. In today's video, we'll explore an important and often overlooked subject: how living with family in your later years may not always be the solution to happiness and independence. By the end of this video, you'll understand why maintaining your autonomy during your senior years is not just a luxury. It's an essential part of your emotional well-being. You'll discover how sacrificing your desires for the sake of your family can lead to deep feelings of resentment, loss of identity, and emotional burnout. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day obligations of caregiving and family life, but when it comes at the expense of your happiness, it can have serious consequences on your mental health. But that's not all. We're also going to delve into the personal journey of a woman named Carol, a story of emotional transformation, self-realization, and the bold decision to reclaim her independence. Carol's journey isn't just about leaving a living situation. It's about rediscovering joy, peace, and a renewed sense of self after a difficult transition. You'll see how her decision to move back into her own home allowed her to regain control of her life and begin to thrive again. Additionally, we'll talk about why maintaining a balance between family relationships and personal space is absolutely crucial for nurturing healthy connections without losing yourself in the process. After all, it's possible to love your family deeply, but still need time and space for yourself. This balance is the key to living a happy, fulfilled life, even in your later years. Stay tuned as we discuss how you can start living your life to the fullest, no matter your age, by prioritizing your own needs and setting healthy boundaries. If you've ever wondered how to reclaim your happiness, boost your self-esteem, and cultivate stronger bonds with your loved ones without losing your identity, then this video is definitely for you. Let's explore this crucial topic and empower you to make decisions that benefit your happiness, emotional well-being, and overall quality of life in your golden years. Watch until the end, because we'll share insights that could potentially change the way you live and transform the way you relate to your family moving forward. Before we dive in, if you're not already subscribed to this channel, I highly recommend doing so and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Your support means the world to me, and if you enjoy this content, you can help me spread these valuable lessons by liking and sharing the video. If you find this topic interesting, feel free to comment 1 below. If you don't, please comment 0, and let me know what I can do to improve and create even better videos for you. Now, let's get started. A friend named Carol comes to mind, and I can't help but feel a deep sense of empathy for her. After the heartbreaking loss of her beloved husband, Carol made a decision that many would understand, though perhaps not fully appreciate: the decision to move in with her youngest son, Eric. For most of her life, Carol had poured all of herself into her family, giving them the kind of love, warmth, and devotion that only a mother can provide. She was the rock, the steady hand that held everything together. When her husband's health began to decline, Carol became his primary caregiver, tending to him day and night without a single complaint. Her love for him was boundless, and her sense of duty to him was unquestionable. But when he passed away, the loss was immeasurable, and in the silence that followed, a void started to take shape, one that seemed too vast to fill. She believed that by moving closer to Eric and her grandchildren, she could ease that aching emptiness. After all, what could be more comforting than the closeness of family, right? She envisioned this new chapter as one where she would find peace, joy, and connection once again. With hope in her heart, Carol packed her suitcase, determined that this move would be the key to her happiness. "It will be good for everyone," she said, a warm smile lighting up her face as she imagined the days ahead. She longed to reconnect with her family, to become a more active part of her grandchildren's lives, and to offer her support to Eric and his wife, Sarah, in their busy routines. This move was her way of embracing life anew, of diving into the warmth of family bonds, and she carried with her a sense of excitement and anticipation for what was to come. The house was spacious, the children were thrilled, and for a brief time, everything seemed to fall into place. It felt like the perfect family reunion, like something straight out of a dream. But as time passed, the reality of the situation began to shift, and the dream she had envisioned slowly began to unravel. Carol, in her desire to be needed, fell into a rhythm of caring for everyone. Cooking, cleaning, and taking on tasks she hadn't expected. What had started as small favors for her family turned into an overwhelming list of daily responsibilities. The afternoon she had once imagined spending leisurely, reading, walking, or simply enjoying quiet reflection, were overtaken by an endless array of chores and duties. Carol had moved into what she thought would be a nurturing environment, yet she found herself slipping into the role of an unofficial caregiver, constantly juggling the needs of others. Her sense of purpose, which had initially filled her with warmth and satisfaction, began to drain her energy. Despite her best efforts to stay positive, the weight of constant responsibility grew heavier with each passing day. What had once been a sanctuary of love seemed to be slowly turning into a cage of obligations. Eric, though well-meaning, often asked her for help. "Mom, could you pick up the kids from school today?" And though Carol was tired, she always answered with a smile, always willing to lend a hand. But over time, even that simple act of kindness began to take a toll on her well-being. What had once felt like an act of love and togetherness now felt like a silent burden, one that she had no way of shaking off. The loneliness she had hoped to escape from, by surrounding herself with family, grew even more pronounced, making her feel emotionally isolated. Ironically, even though she was physically surrounded by loved ones, she felt more alone than ever before. The very thing that she had believed would heal her heart, the presence of family, had unintentionally become the source of her pain. It was as if her role had shifted from being a cherished member of the household to becoming little more than an afterthought. She had imagined that her later years would be filled with closeness, affection, and family bonding. But instead, she found herself slipping into the background, unnoticed and unappreciated. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. As conversations with Eric and Sarah dwindled to the bare essentials, the mundane details of daily life, Carol began to question her place within the family. She could feel it, though she was still needed, she was no longer truly seen. The warmth and closeness she had envisioned were slowly being replaced by a quiet, creeping disillusionment. She began to wonder if this was really what she had worked for all her life. Was the constant sacrifice of her own needs and desires truly worth being physically close to her family? The dream of aging surrounded by love and support now felt like a distant memory. The once hopeful idea of a fulfilling old age surrounded by family began to feel like a hollow promise. Carol couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost herself somewhere in the process. In moments of quiet reflection, she started to consider what it would be like to carve out a new path for herself, one that honored her needs, desires, and the person she still was deep inside. She began to imagine a future where she could find peace on her terms, a life that wasn't defined solely by sacrifice. Maybe there was another way, a path that truly nurtured her spirit and allowed her to find joy once again, on her own, not as an extension of someone else's needs. Carol wasn't sure what that path would look like, but for the first time in a long while, she felt the stirrings of hope. There was more to her life than the role she had assumed, and she was beginning to realize that she still had the power to shape her own story. The first signs of discord crept into Carol's life almost unnoticed, like tiny cracks beginning to form in a wall that had once stood strong and unwavering. At first, she convinced herself that it was natural for Eric and Sarah to ask for her help with the household chores and taking care of the children. After all, Carol had always prided herself on being a dedicated, loving mother, and she saw her move to their home as an opportunity to contribute, an opportunity to support her family, to make their lives a little easier. She genuinely believed that her presence would be a positive addition, that she could step in with open arms to ease the burdens of their busy lives, giving them the space to thrive while she found joy in helping. But what began as the occasional favor soon evolved into a constant series of demands. What had once felt like a gesture of gratitude began to morph into an unspoken expectation. It wasn't just one errand here and there anymore. It was endless tasks, day after day, without a single moment to breathe. The small, precious moments she once spent on herself, her walks in the fresh air, reading a book by the window, the quiet reflection that soothed her soul, began to slowly evaporate until there was little left for her to hold on to. As time passed, Carol couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling creeping over her. The thought that had initially crossed her mind as a passing doubt now grew louder. Her presence, which had once been welcomed with warmth, was slowly becoming a burden. She was no longer seen as the beloved mother and grandmother who had so much to offer. Instead, she was viewed more as a tool, a helper, a caregiver, someone to run errands and take care of everyone's needs without question. She could feel it in the subtle shift of tone when Eric and Sarah spoke to her, a difference that pierced her heart in ways they could never understand. "Mom, can you run to the store today?" Sarah would ask casually, and Carol's heart sank. The words were no longer wrapped in love or consideration. They were simply demands that seemed to carry no more emotional weight than a grocery list. Slowly, what had once been an act of kindness, helping her children in their times of need, had become a suffocating obligation. Carol found herself taking on the role of the household's primary caretaker, while Eric and Sarah, perhaps without even realizing it, were retreating into their own lives. What should have been a joyous living arrangement turned into a relentless routine, where Carol's efforts were neither acknowledged nor celebrated. Instead, her presence was now treated like an unspoken contract, one that promised she would be there for every need, no matter the cost to her peace of mind. The growing demands on Carol's time and energy, small daily tasks that, on their own, might have seemed insignificant, began to accumulate, and with them, a deep sense of frustration and resentment. She couldn't help but feel trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. Her own needs, and her desires, were continuously sidelined to make room for everyone else's. The feeling of being unappreciated, of giving endlessly without receiving even a simple thank you, began to wear her down. Each request, every task completed, felt more like a weight on her shoulders, an emotional wound that she carried quietly, hoping that somehow things would change, that someone would notice. But they didn't. The home that had once been her sanctuary, a place where she could rest and recharge, now felt more like a prison. She had sacrificed her autonomy and her sense of individuality, all for the sake of family life. Her role had become one of servitude, and it was starting to eat away at her spirit. The affection she had once felt for Eric and Sarah, even for her grandchildren, was now clouded by frustration and sadness. She no longer recognized herself. She had become a mere shell of the person she once was. The hardest part was realizing that, rather than bringing her closer to her family, the constant closeness was pushing her further away from them. The emotional intimacy that had once bound them together had slowly morphed into walls, deep and unspoken, between Carol and her loved ones. What had started as small, seemingly trivial disagreements now felt like cracks in the foundation of their relationship. Cracks that, if left untreated, could eventually split them apart. Carol couldn't ignore the growing tension, the mounting frustration that came with each passing day. She began to feel the weight of it all, a heaviness that only deepened with time. One evening, as she lay in bed, staring into the darkness, the quiet stillness of the night gave her the space to reflect. Her once peaceful nights of rest had become long hours of contemplation. She thought back to the moments in her life when she had truly felt content, those rare times when she had been free to make her own choices, to go for a walk without worrying about the next errand, to read a book without interruption. In those moments, she had been herself, whole, complete, happy. But now, she found herself lost in the echo of her unfulfilled desires, wondering if by moving in with Eric and Sarah, she had unknowingly sacrificed something far more precious. Her independence, her happiness, her very identity. It felt as though she had given up the life she had once cherished in exchange for a role that did not fit her anymore, a role that left her heart empty and aching for the freedom she had relinquished. The realization was painful but undeniable. Staying in this situation, in this role, was not helping anyone. Not her, and certainly not her family. She had become a ghost in her own life, slowly fading into a routine that no longer served her or her loved ones. Carol could no longer ignore the truth. She needed to reclaim herself. She needed to find her joy again, to seek out the things that had once filled her heart with light. She knew that if she didn't, she might lose herself forever. The question was no longer whether she could continue, but whether she should. Carol had sacrificed enough. She had given her love, her time, and her energy. It was time to rediscover who she was beyond the demands of others. It was time to live her life for herself again. The decision to leave and change her life once again was not one Carol took lightly. It was, in fact, one of the most difficult choices she had ever faced. Carol had spent years nurturing the bond with her grandchildren, cherishing every moment of closeness, laughter, and connection. The idea of stepping away from that, of saying goodbye to the comfort and joy of being so deeply entwined with her family, felt like an immense loss. Yet, somewhere deep inside, Carol understood that the very thing she had to give up to gain her sense of self, her independence, was exactly what would allow her to be the mother and grandmother her family truly needed. She realized that, to be there for them in the most meaningful way, she first had to be whole within herself. She had spent so many years giving to others, but now she needed to give to herself. Her mind wandered back to the time before she had moved in with Eric, when life was simpler and more peaceful. Carol vividly remembered the days after her husband's passing, how, despite the grief, she had found a quiet sort of happiness in her daily routine. She had surrounded herself with friends, found fulfillment in activities that nourished her soul, and discovered that even in solitude, she was capable of joy. But after moving in with Eric, she had gradually lost sight of that peace, caught up in the demands of others' needs. It wasn't that she didn't love them, she did. It wasn't that she wasn't grateful for the closeness. But something inside her had begun to stir, a longing to reclaim the autonomy she once had, to return to the roots of who she was before her life became entangled with the needs of everyone else. The idea of going back to her hometown, to the place where her identity had been formed, was a quiet but powerful thought that began to take hold. There she could rediscover the woman she had once been, the woman who knew the value of her own space, her own time, and her own choices. She began to understand that her happiness wasn't going to come from being constantly surrounded by her family, however much she loved them, but from finding a balance between loving them and taking care of herself. In a moment of deep clarity, Carol came to a profound realization. If she wanted to keep her dignity, emotional well-being, and a sense of peace, she had to make a choice that might be difficult, but was ultimately the best thing for her. She knew that it wouldn't be easy, that the conversation with Eric and Sarah would be painful and possibly fraught with disappointment. But it had to be done. With each passing day, Carol grew more resolute. She no longer wanted to feel like a passive presence in her son's household, quietly fading into the background. She wanted to take the reins of her life, to step out of the shadows and reclaim the power to shape her own future, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. She wanted her life to be hers again, fully and unapologetically. And so, with that deep clarity and conviction, she began to plan. Her path forward would be one of courage, one that demanded bravery and self-compassion. It would be difficult, yes, but Carol knew that true happiness lay on the other side of this decision. And so it was that one morning, with the warm scent of coffee still hanging in the air, Carol sat down with Eric and Sarah, her heart racing. She had been planning this conversation for days, and though her mind was filled with apprehension, her resolve remained unshaken. She took a deep breath, then looked Eric directly in the eyes. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, her voice trembling slightly but carrying a weight of certainty. "I think it's time for me to walk my own path. I need to go back to my own home, to reclaim the peace and independence I've lost along the way." The words hung in the air, and for a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Carol's heart pounded in her chest as she braced herself for the reaction that was surely coming. "After what seemed like an eternity, Sarah, who had been quiet until then, slowly nodded, her expression shifting as if she had already begun to understand the depth of Carol's words. "We're going to miss you so much," Sarah said softly, her voice laden with emotion. "But we want you to find happiness. And if that means returning to your own space, to take care of yourself, then we support you in that." The warmth in Sarah's voice, the understanding in her eyes, broke something open in Carol. She hadn't realized just how much she needed to hear those words, how much she had longed for her family to see her, to truly understand her. In that moment, Carol felt a wave of relief wash over her, a quiet joy in knowing that she wasn't alone in this decision. For the first time in ages, she felt deeply seen, and for the first time in a long time, she was able to exhale fully, knowing that she had made the right choice for herself. The day Carol left for her hometown was one of those bittersweet moments that filled her heart with a complicated mixture of emotions: sorrow, nostalgia, and the spark of something new. As she packed her belongings, her heart felt heavy. Leaving Eric's home, where she had spent so many years surrounded by the laughter of her son and grandchildren, was excruciating. Each corner of the house held memories, moments of joy, tenderness, and connection. The scent of her daughter-in-law's cooking, the sound of her grandchildren's playful chatter, and the cozy evenings spent together would linger in her mind long after she left. But despite the profound attachment to this family home, there was also a quiet yearning that had been building within her, a desire to reclaim her own space, to return to the place that had once been her sanctuary. As difficult as it was to say goodbye, the thought of returning to her own home, where she could live on her own terms, ignited a flicker of hope in her heart, a sense of anticipation for the future. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment "tube" below to let me know that you are still here with me. When she finally arrived at her old house, the weight she had carried for so long seemed to gently lift from her shoulders. She opened the door to her sanctuary, and the silence that greeted her was not emptiness but peace. The stillness of the house felt like an embrace, a warm reminder that this was her refuge, her place of solitude and freedom. It was a silence so different from the constant buzz of activity she had grown used to at Eric's home. Here, there was room for her thoughts, room for her to breathe, and the undeniable feeling of being at home with herself. It was like stepping into a calm after a storm. The overwhelming rush of freedom, the kind that she hadn't truly experienced in years, washed over her, indescribable, yet so deeply fulfilling. In the days that followed, Carol felt like she was rediscovering herself in the most beautiful, tender way. She resumed her morning walks, something she had once loved but had left behind in the chaos of family life. The familiar streets greeted her like old friends, and with each step, she felt her connection to herself deepen. She reached out to old friends, rekindling relationships that had faded with time, and ventured into new hobbies, things she had longed to do but never found the time or courage to pursue. Each day felt like a fresh page, a new opportunity to embrace the life she had once adored. As she took those small, deliberate steps toward independence, Carol was filled with a quiet sense of triumph. Every choice she made, every bit of joy she rediscovered, reaffirmed that she had made the right decision. She felt alive in ways she hadn't felt in years, like the woman she once was, only more grounded, more confident, and more at peace. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when loneliness crept in, but she knew in her heart that she had taken a bold step toward living life on her own terms. The freedom she had longed for wasn't a distant dream anymore. It was real, it was now, and Carol was determined to embrace it fully, to cherish every moment, every opportunity. Carol's journey reflects a powerful and often overlooked truth, that the most meaningful family relationships are built on respect for one another's space and individuality. Her decision to return to her own home wasn't just about gaining independence. It was about creating a healthier, more harmonious dynamic with her family. So often, the idea of living apart from loved ones is met with a sense of loss, but Carol knew that physical separation could actually bring her closer to her family. It allowed her to maintain her autonomy, to nurture her own life, while still keeping the bonds of love and respect strong. Living separately meant that every visit, every moment spent together, became special. The absence made the heart grow fonder, and the moments shared were no longer weighed down by the tensions that can arise from constant proximity. Carol had learned that finding the balance between closeness and space was crucial for her peace of mind, and for the health of her family relationships. As much as adult children cherish their parents, they also need the freedom to live their own lives, raise their children, and build their own futures. Similarly, elderly parents need the space to preserve their sense of self, to continue growing, and to enjoy life on their own terms. Carol's realization was that in order for both generations to thrive, they needed to respect one another's need for space. It wasn't about distance, it was about understanding, mutual respect, and allowing each other the freedom to flourish. And when this balance was achieved, the love between them grew stronger, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine appreciation for one another's presence in each other's lives. Now, when Carol visits Eric and his family, those moments are no longer clouded by the daily pressures of living together. Instead, they are filled with a deep, joyful connection, each visit a precious gift, one that is longed for and treasured. Carol knows that she is there by her own choice, and her family welcomes her with open arms, knowing that her presence is a blessing, not a duty. This new dynamic, where space and balance are honored, transforms each visit into something truly special, something that deepens the love and respect they all share. The simplicity of these moments, when shared with a sense of gratitude and understanding, becomes the foundation for a more fulfilling, loving family life. Achieving a delicate balance in family relationships is truly one of the cornerstones of a peaceful, loving existence. It's about creating a space where each person, especially within the family, can thrive individually while remaining connected to each other. For elderly parents, this balance becomes even more important, as it helps them maintain their dignity, independence, and self-respect. For adult children, it offers the opportunity to see their parents in a new light, appreciating the precious time they have together, and understanding that shared moments are not guaranteed. As Carol came to realize, taking care of herself wasn't just a matter of physical well-being. It was an essential part of preserving her emotional health and strengthening her relationships with Eric and her grandchildren. At first, it wasn't easy. This self-care felt almost indulgent, as though she was somehow neglecting her role as a caregiver. But the deeper she dug into herself, the clearer it became. Nurturing herself was actually the key to nurturing those around her. Achieving this balance, however, is often an emotional minefield. The sheer weight of responsibility, love, and duty can make it feel impossible to carve out moments for personal reflection, let alone self-care. The truth is, as we age, we're so often expected to give, and give again. Sometimes to the point where we forget to take anything for ourselves. Sacrifice, when pushed too far, becomes a dangerous trap, especially for parents who have spent their lives prioritizing their children's needs over their own. In their zealous attempt to protect and support their children, they can begin to ignore the desires that once made them who they were. Carol, for a time, became a victim of this very cycle. She convinced herself that by suppressing her own wishes, by constantly putting others first, she was fulfilling her duty as a loving mother and grandmother. But the truth was, Carol had lost sight of herself. In her dedication to her family, she had abandoned the very things that once brought her joy and peace. Over time, this noble act of love turned into a silent, growing resentment. Not because she didn't love her children, but because she felt like she had lost herself in the process. That was the hardest part to face. How could love, something so pure and selfless, lead to feelings of bitterness and sorrow? The danger of sacrifice is that it often comes at the expense of one's own happiness, and it's so easy to forget that our own desires and needs are not selfish, they are human. When parents give up everything to satisfy their children's needs, they can lose touch with the very things that make life worth living. The passions, hobbies, and dreams that once lit them up. In the case of Carol, this was painfully evident. Slowly, without even realizing it, she began to give up everything that once filled her heart with joy. She stopped reading books, those comforting escapes she once loved, and she withdrew from social groups that had previously been a source of inspiration and connection. The activities she used to find so fulfilling were pushed aside in the name of sacrifice. She believed she was doing the right thing. After all, she was a mother and grandmother, and this was what she was supposed to do. But in truth, all of this self-neglect began to erode her sense of self. Instead of feeling a deep satisfaction from her acts of love, Carol found herself slipping into a profound emptiness, a hollow feeling, as if life itself had become less vibrant and meaningful. It's crucial to recognize that self-care is not the same as selfishness. It is, in fact, a vital part of living a balanced, fulfilling life. As the old saying goes, you cannot offer what you do not have. Parents, in particular, cannot continue to be strong, supportive pillars for their children if they are emotionally and physically drained. By tending to her own needs, prioritizing her health, finding time for the things that brought her peace, Carol was able to reawaken the joy and vitality she had once known. She rediscovered her zest for life, and in doing so, became a better version of herself for her family. She didn't just become a more loving and present mother and grandmother. She became a woman who was fully alive, who was able to give without depleting herself. The difference was palpable, not just for her, but for everyone around her. Carol learned, in the most profound way, that caring for herself was, in the end, the greatest gift she could give to her loved ones. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Carol's story serves as a poignant and deeply moving reminder of something many of us overlook: the importance of nurturing our own well-being while caring for others. In our journeys as parents, we often find ourselves giving, sacrificing, and putting the needs of others first. Yet, it is so easy to forget that our own happiness and emotional health are just as vital as the care we give to our families. Sacrifice, especially in parenting, is part of the process, yes, but it should never strip us of our own joy, fulfillment, and sense of self. True, deep, and meaningful love within families is born from the ability to live authentically, from being able to take care of ourselves first so that we have the energy and emotional capacity to give to others. Carol, in her journey, reveals that when we choose to live fully for ourselves, when we prioritize our own well-being, we are not only enhancing our own lives but also showing our children the priceless value of living authentically and harmoniously. Happiness and fulfillment are not just abstract goals. They are rights we should all embrace, especially as we age. Too often, we hear that our worth comes from what we do for others. But the truth is that creating a life that brings us joy and contentment is the foundation of a truly loving and peaceful family environment. Carol's experience, in particular, touches a chord in all of us, reminding us of the critical importance of maintaining our independence, especially in later years. So many of us are conditioned to think that, as we grow older, we must set aside our personal needs and desires for the sake of our children, that we should quietly slip into the background to be helpful, without thinking of ourselves. But Carol's courageous decision to leave Eric's home and return to her own was not just about moving house. It was a powerful affirmation of her autonomy, a bold statement that she still mattered, that her well-being was still important. In doing so, Carol was teaching us all a deeply transformative lesson. Autonomy in our later years doesn't mean distancing ourselves from family. It means finding the delicate, yet profound, balance where we can live fully and freely, without being weighed down by unnecessary burdens and expectations. Through her journey of self-care and reclaiming her independence, Carol blossomed into a more joyful, attentive, and present mother and grandmother. She had created the space she needed to heal, grow, and enjoy her time with her family without feeling drained or resentful. This balance she achieved wasn't just about her own happiness. It was about fostering relationships built on respect and love, where each person's individuality is cherished and honored. For those of us in similar situations, Carol's story is a testament to the idea that seeking autonomy is not selfish. In fact, it's a profound act of self-love. By taking the time to honor our own needs, to cultivate our own interests, and to ensure that we have space to breathe, we are taking the necessary steps to live a balanced, healthy, and meaningful life. It's crucial to reflect on your own life, your needs, your desires, and your dreams. I encourage you, as I do myself, to take ownership of your happiness. Communicate openly with your family about your needs and aspirations, and remember that it's okay to put yourself first sometimes. We often think that sacrificing ourselves for the happiness of others is noble, but true happiness can only come when we are living in alignment with our own values and needs. Carol's story beautifully illustrates that the value of autonomy in old age is not something to be afraid of. It's a gift, both to ourselves and to those we love. When we choose independence, we are not rejecting our family. We are choosing to live with dignity, to preserve what makes us unique, and to continue growing and learning. This is the most precious gift we can give to our children, a model of a life lived with purpose, joy, and self-love. And in doing so, we leave behind not just memories, but a legacy of resilience, authenticity, and the understanding that we all deserve to live fully at every age. As we reflect on Carol's powerful journey, we've learned a truly valuable lesson: the importance of balancing our self-care with our responsibilities to others. Maintaining our independence and prioritizing our well-being isn't selfish. It's essential for living a fulfilling life and nurturing healthier, more harmonious relationships. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one thing you've learned from this story that you're committed to practicing in your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and found it meaningful, please leave a comment, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content that inspires and empowers you to live a full, healthy, and independent life. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourself. It's the best gift you can give to those you love.